Good afternoon and welcome to the Engineering Talent Awards nominee interviews. This is a series of webinar interviews led by myself and Fayon Dixon in discussion with those who have been nominated at this year's awards. The Engineering Talent Awards are hosted by Equal Engineers. Equal Engineers are an organisation focused on improving the diversity and inclusion of the engineering industry. The awards were of course scheduled to take place in April, but due to the ongoing coronavirus pandemic are now scheduled to take place in future. A link to this and all the webinars in the series will be available for sharing once each is complete. In today's webinar, I'm here talking to Sam Neath and Bruce Daughtry of BAE Systems, which is nominated for Employee Network of the Year for its LGBTQ+ network, Outlink UK. Outlink UK is BAE Systems' UK-wide employee resource group, aimed specifically at LGBTQ+ colleagues. They have three key objectives: to attract and retain diverse talent, create a more diverse and inclusive workplace culture, and continue to attract, sustain, and develop critical industry skills and capabilities. Welcome to Sam and Bruce, who are the co-chairs. Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
You guys doing well?
Very well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Excellent. So to explain for anybody watching, I shall go through and ask some pre-prepared questions to Sam and Bruce. Hopefully start a nice dialogue. And at any point, should you wish to enter your own question, there is a Q&A box down the bottom. Please feel free to submit questions there, and we shall get to those probably towards the second half or the end. So thanks very much to anybody who is joining us. First of all, Bruce and Sam, do you want to just introduce yourselves and say what it is that you do at BAE Systems?
Yep, so let's say Bruce Daughtry, been with the company 33 years on July the 13th, not that date's burned into the brain. So been in engineering ever since I joined the company, still there, and current position is, title is Engineering Manager, Technical Training. So basically now, rather than doing engineering, I'm now more managing engineering and specifically looking at the learning and development needs of our engineering workforce in the UK to ensure we are sustained to keep it going forward in the future.
Fantastic. And Sam?
Yeah, hi, I'm Sam Neath. I've been with BAE Systems now for about 5.5 years. Not quite as long as Bruce. My current role, well, I have two actually. One of them is I'm a sales lead in our defence bit of the business, but I also now work with the Central Diversity and Inclusion team, working with our employee resource groups.
Fantastic. What I'll probably do then is, since my first question was going to be what you do, from an engineering standpoint on a day-to-day basis, I will put that to Bruce with his 30+ years experience.
Right. I'll tell you what, I'll take you back even further than that about, first off, why engineering?
Please do.
10 years old, school open day where the school my brother was at, got to the physics lab. Parents had to drag me out of there because from that point on, I always knew it was engineering was where I wanted to be. The science, the technology, all that aspects just had me hooked from that point forward. So career direction, that was it. It was planned. All my subject choices and all the rest of it would take me down that road to get a degree in electrical and electronic engineering. Then had a look around what job opportunities were. A lot of big industries out there. Came down to sunny Lancashire. I'd interview at Wharton, and I was offered a job as a systems engineer, which certainly took me interest, and also the fact you've got nice big aeroplanes there and all the rest of it, the technology you can actually see. So I thought, yeah, take up the job offer. So started off 6 or so years working on the Eurofighter Typhoon aircraft when it was a blank sheet of paper, designing some of the avionics subsystems. Then moved onto the Tornado project to look at upgrading that aircraft, and that was another good 6-7 years looking at system integration, system safety, as well as looking at some process improvements of how can we actually do things better as an engineer. Then spent the next sort of 15 years in the research and technology part of the company, doing some really exciting things, one of which was world's first of actually linking fast jet aircraft to simulators on the ground and a bunch of computer generated entities, such that you could actually have as far as the aircrew were concerned, they were fighting real aircraft up in the air when actually they were the only one in the air. That was, to say, fantastic piece of work that we did around that, and all about how can we actually therefore improve the training opportunities for the RAF. And then 2015 then did a move to more sort of managing the engineering capability. How do we actually ensure we have the necessary tools, skills and experience in the people to take the company forward as we move forward into the next generation.
Wow, so quite a really long route.
Yeah, pit stop of 33 years in about 2 minutes.
And just quickly, how has the change been from being an active on the ground sort of engineer more to managing engineers? How's that been?
I would say, as an engineer, that's probably the hardest thing to do. As a young engineer, you always want to keep telling your boss to stop interfering and stop meddling and all the rest of it. But when you're an engineer, you're moving up the management, you want to actually, you got into engineering because you like doing engineering. So you want to do that. And that's the hardest thing to learn to know. You've actually got to start sitting on your hands. That's what your teams are for. Now to sit there and elevate yourself out of that a little bit. That was hard to learn.
Yes. Well, it's nice to hear that you were interested from such a young age, because you hear such a mixed story. I've done several of these webinars and hearing different routes into engineering. And I think this might be the first time where I've had somebody right from school. So that's great to hear. Sam, I'll put this one to you first, but I'll put this one to you as well, Bruce, afterwards, because it's quite a big question that I ask everybody. Have you ever had to overcome any adversity? And if so, can you explain?
Yeah, I've been really fortunate actually, in that certainly my sexual orientation hasn't presented any blockers for me, certainly in the workplace, and especially at BAE, and possibly that's due to the moving times. But yeah, so I've been really lucky. It's never been really much of a problem for me.
That's nice to hear. I mean, that's a very acceptable answer to that question. I mean, it speaks hopefully of progress. What about you, Bruce? Obviously, having been with the company such a long time.
So long. Well, I say after 33 years, for almost effectively the first 20 years of that, I was very much firmly in the closet in work. Because I say, coming in the late 80s, the general cult society culture, also getting into the era of Section 28, wasn't particularly feeling that it was quite welcoming. And also, as a company back then, very much sort of historical, sort of the very sort of more manufacturing macho type society that we had back there. So at that point, thinking, hiding who I was, working through, have to actually hold my hand up to say I was also guilty of passing when somebody who's now one of my good friends came out in the late 90s, and how that reaction wasn't great. So I just sort of thinking, kept me further in the closet during that period of time. Met the love of my life in 2000, civil partnership in 2006, but then only actually told 3 people at work at that point about there, which was a bit hard in terms of where you're at. But then 2007, 2008, then properly came out. And I say from that, I've never had any issues for there. It was more that perceived of how I felt things were in the past that made me keep what I was doing, the little force field there to say, right, I am keeping myself hidden. So, but throughout the whole time, I say I've never actually any personal impacts on me apart from what it's like when you're actually in the closet.
Absolutely, but I mean that's such an intense experience, I think which anybody, I think, really from the LGBTQ plus family has been through. Certainly, I did. Yeah, I mean, and to have been such a long time with one company and see it change, like you say, it's almost as if, and not just the company, just with society, you sort of get in your own head, your own ideas, and sometimes they can actually even be worse than reality. So that's fascinating. So moving on to Outlink then, and again, I'll pop to you first, Sam. How long has Outlink UK been running, and also what brought it about?
Yeah, so it started about 10 years ago from a small group in the air bit of the business, and then sort of grew and grew, and now it's a UK-wide network open to all employees in the UK. It's been that way for about 5 years, and we've been rapidly growing since that point. We launched an allies network in about 2017, and since then we saw a real large increase in our engagement and the amount of people that were happy to kind of join us, as visible allies. And then just sort of been going from strength to strength since having that backing.
Amazing.
Bruce, have you been with Outlink from the beginning?
Not quite the beginning. I said I joined, got involved late 2012 after I lost my civil partner. Then I knew a couple of the steering group, and after a few beers and a social night out, then saying, "But why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that?" I said, "Well, if you so passionate about it. Why don't you come and join us? So I've been there for a lot of the journey. I say the very first part, as Sam said, was 2010 in the air part of the business, where there's a couple of individuals, Simon and Roland, asked permission, could we form a little sort of support group? And that just started off with just a few people meeting at coffees over lunchtime or whatever, and stayed at that level until we had 2013, when we actually said, well, can we actually go and do Pride, demonstrate our bit? Lots of conversations, discussions. As a business, that was a big step in terms of there. Did our first Pride at Manchester, and then from there that built up a little bit more momentum. And then, as Sam said, we then got the UK wide network in 2015, and then from the Allied side, it's just, it's grown, but it's grown in the way that's sustainable. Because if the membership graph, we had a big spike as you get for an initiative, and there was always a worry, are we going to do that? And then it's going to go like that or do that. But it actually then continued, not at the same rate as the initiative time, but it's been almost constant for the last sort of 3 years at the same rate. And that's not because there's big initiatives going on or whatever. That's actually because people are now talking to people. The allies are talking to people. They're having conversations. People ask questions of, oh, what's your landlord? Or what's your allies card? What's all that about? So it's actually having the changes happen for the right reasons. Yes, it takes time, but actually it's going to give us that actually embedded culture change that we actually need, rather than what can be sort of the whiz bang moment and then we forget about it.
No, amazing. I mean, it's sort of, organic growth, word of mouth. I mean, really, that's the way to make anything sustainable, isn't it? I mean, that's how, societies change and most progress comes around. So that's, I think, as you said, I think it's fantastic. Sam, so I hope these figures are correct or accurate or up to date. Apologies if they're not. But your LGBTQ plus and staff allies account for 6.8% of your overall staff, which to me seems really, really high. Is that number now higher or lower than sort of the average? Do you know?
I don't know about the average. I mean, certainly for us, that number has grown and grown since 2017. As Bruce said, we've had quite steady growth through that word of mouth, and various activities and initiatives that we've had. I mean, 6.8% is quite a lot when your employees are sort of 33,000. So it's amazing to have that kind of numbers behind us and in support of us. They've been fantastic. We've kind of got a bit of our aim in our heads of about 10% to 20% to make real cultural change in the business. So that's, we're going to keep driving and hopefully exceed that one day. Yeah.
Absolutely. And this is a question to both of you, I find it really sort of fascinating and I think so important, so vital that, it's not just LGBTQ plus staff, but actually really this sort of sense of allyship and ally program. Has that been instrumental, do you think, to the success of Outlink UK?
I think it probably has to say, when we first started, it was LGBTQ plus people that was it. That was all the sort of what the membership was. But and you do anything like this, we could just stay, if it just stayed like that, then you'd almost pitch into the converted. You're not going to have change because we are the minority.
Absolutely.
And then it's getting out there, getting the education. And then as people started to learn and understand, that's become fundamental to how we go forward. And it's a lot of the work, it's the work that what the allies are doing. They're actually helping drive the change because that's the majority and they're the ones. And also when they do the conversations and actually talk to their teams, they seem to have that vested interest in what we're talking about, because if they're straight, then it comes from that more neutral point of view rather than it being somebody who could just be there as lobbying.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sam, do you, feedback from the allies that actually take part, I assume, has that been positive? Have they taken something from it themselves as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one thing we always hear from allies is, okay, I've signed up now. What can I do? How can I help? Which is a tough one to answer, really. And obviously being visible and supportive and starting these conversations is what everyone can do kind of on the ground. But then we've had some incredible allies do even bigger and greater things, like actually arranging for us to go and walk in one of the Pride events and setting up their own events. We've actually, in one of our bits of the business for Pride Month, one of our allies has taken it upon themselves to arrange a load of events in their local business. which is just incredible. And, that she doesn't have to do that. They don't have to do that as allies. That, as Bruce said, they don't have a vested interest. It's not benefiting them. It's benefiting the wider business and the wider LGBT community. So yeah, it's amazing to see.
I think that's absolutely wonderful. And I mean, it's absolutely, has to be the future, doesn't it, really, of raising awareness throughout society. If only more people could do this. So obviously, Outling, you support and run external events which are targeted at the LGBTQ plus community. I know those are, particularly Pride. Do you want to tell me about sort of what activities you do around Pride?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, so we certainly attending Pride, as Bruce mentioned, a few years ago we attended our first Pride, and that was quite a big thing, just to give the chance for LGBT employees to be involved with something like that, outside of work is really great. And then, the company backing of those events has just grown and grown, from having, we had, managing director from one of our bits of the business is a senior sponsor of ours, and he's walked in Pride in London parade. And last year, for the first time, we actually sponsored 3 Prides as well around the country. Wow. Which we were really proud of. So we were headline sponsor for the first ever Pride in Surrey, which happened, and we sponsored a couple of others as well. And it just kind of shows the change in attitudes of the business in such a short space of time. To have that actual financial support and whole company backing of these external Pride events and helping our wider community.
Yeah, that's really amazing. It's great to be able to sort of grow externally and then actually start to support other areas of the community, as you say, financially. Everybody needs money. And Pride certainly does. So that's fantastic. And Bruce, I mean, what must it be like to have started the company, as you say, years and years ago, and by your own admission, been very sort of deeply in the closet to now? How must it feel walking at a Pride event?
That very first Pride event is, the word Pride really just sums up in big capital flashing letters. For there to actually be able to be me, but also to be me in the company that actually, do love and, to go forward with it. So it's just fantastic. It's hard to describe the emotions that it feels. But if you said to me 33 years ago, would we be there? I'd go, no. But with where we are now and how the journey just keep going on, it feels like it's gathering pace. So we're moving faster as we go forward. It's just fantastic.
Yes, it's wonderful to have that sort of support. I mean, now throughout the company, it's just brilliant. This was really exciting then when I read this. So Outlook actually run ally and trans courses, which I thought was amazing. I mean, I think those are new. Sam, when did they come about, and have they been popular?
Yeah, absolutely. They've sort of grown over the last few years, really. We hold an internal conference every year for our staff, and we use that as a platform for learning and education, especially for our allies. And we've done, a number of subjects such as bi-inclusion, trans-inclusion, allies sort of training, and then those 2 in particular were really popular, and we found they were really useful for people. And so decided to make them into a slightly more formal training course, which is now available to all staff and still run by ourselves. We still have the kind of the subject matter expertise goes into those courses, and they're interactive, and they open up the conversation, and allow people to ask questions as well. They've been fab. I think last year we trained something like almost 500 people we reached in the business, and then this year so far it's about 350 we've reached already, and want to continue doing that. Obviously, with the change with COVID, we can't do those in person anymore. So we're looking at more virtual ways of reaching out to people, and it's going really well. Yeah,
and Bruce, I'll put this one to you. So I believe there's actually a new trans policy which came around between 2017 and 2018, which is actually HR owned. I mean, how did that come about? I'm assuming that's something that Outlook really pushed for.
It was something, yes, because I say with when it became UK wide 2015, then looking around the business at where the policies were and thinking that there was nothing there for anybody who's looking at transitioning and what's the company doing. I also had a lot of managers who were coming to us asking questions, well, what do we do? So then I had conversations with the business. HR led it, but then they relied heavily on the SMEs within the community, the membership, to actually then drive a policy which was then formally issued in 2017. And the feedback that we had from when Stonewall and others looked at it felt like it was actually almost benchmark in terms of a policy. So we went from having nothing to having something that was benchmark in the space of a year with the full buy-in was was phenomenal. And also we've developed a manager's guide that sits alongside that. So rather than just reading a dry policy document, you've actually got a guide that says, right, as a manager, these are the typical situations that you may experience, and this is actually how to handle them. And then supplement that with then offering, if they want, then we can have somebody from the trans community who can come in and actually deliver the training and have conversations with them to help them navigate through it.
Having that sort of guidebook and sort of, really clear process, I think is so important. And then everybody knows where they stand. Again, I think that's fantastic. And just Bruce, just quickly, engineering, especially historically, can be seen as such a sort of masculine and perhaps a bit sort of, a kind of a closed club or what have you. I mean, to think that this sort of training now is available must be just fantastic for somebody that's been there so long and seen the journey.
Oh, it does, and it sends out a very powerful message in terms of the fact of actually, engineering is open for all, because there is still a stigma.
I love that.
A lot of people don't think engineering is actually, if you're gay, you can't be an engineer. Even had one of my friends of my sister-in-law, where a couple of years ago went, oh, when the Senko was doing it for the company, she said, oh, Bruce has been involved in that. And she went, Bruce, what? Yeah, I mean, Chris is Bruce, yeah, but he's gay. I thought he was a hairdresser. No, we still have that,
Wow.
we still have some of that stigma out there. So
Wow.
all this bit to physically get people to see actually, is you can be LGBTQ+, and you can still be a really good engineer involved in some really high-tech stuff and exciting bits at the forefront of technology. It's getting them to almost become mythbusters to people.
I think you need to get T-shirts printed. Engineering is open to all. I think that was that's brilliant. That sounds like the opening line for a conference I would go to. I love that.
Yeah, and I say as part of that, so we also, again, to try and help for that sort of thing, we are also, if we start doing crop in our submarine sites up in Barrow, I say they've been now starting to get involved with some STEM outreach work in the local schools, again, to help break down the stereotypes, to show that actually engineering is a topic you can come into if you are LGBTQ+, and also the company itself is also, will welcome you with open arms.
Fantastic. I mean, if we'd all had that messaging when we were younger, I think, removing barriers across all groups is vital. So, and school is where it starts. So that's amazing. Reminder to anybody watching who might want to submit any questions, please feel free in the Q&A box below. This I also found fascinating. So I believe you developed a handbook for parents and family members of LGBTQ+ children. I mean, that feeds into what we were just talking about, schools. Sam, how did that come about? And also, again, I keep asking, but what's the feedback been from that? I mean,
yeah, we've got a new fantastic allies lead who joined our steering group, I think it was last year, and he sort of took it upon himself really to drive this initiative, and it's been incredible. So that they did loads of consultation with actual people that work for BAE Systems and that are parents of LGBT people, and got them to share their own personal stories and advice to other parents or other family members of LGBT children, and how they kind of dealt with it, some of the kind of questions that parents might ask themselves when their children come out, and how to deal with it in the best way possible for that child. Again, the feedback has been really, really positive for that. We're now able to share that guide publicly as well. So for other organisations that want something similar, we're very happy to share that. The feedback's been really good. People have found it really helpful again.
I was going to ask about sharing it, because I mean, what a resource to have. I mean, lots of people, I'm sure, would be, fascinated to have that. And it's great if, such a large company has already started putting something out like this. I mean, that's a wonderful resource. Wow, fantastic.
And probably just to say, so as a follow-up from that as well, we also now looking at piloting up on our naval ships about the business, actually getting a parent support group. Actually,
oh, wow.
It's come out off the back of the handbook, so to start doing that. So again, so parents can actually start having that bit. So again, because they're the best ones placed to actually have those conversations and to help themselves. So that's another bit that's sort of we'll see how that goes and how that works, and then look at how we can then look at rolling that out more widely across the company.
Fantastic. And you say that's come from the naval portion?
Yeah, we're piloting that because I say, being a large business, I say it's where you got the pool of people who are willing to try and start doing something. Then let's use that, pilot it, and if it works, it gives us a model to then deploy around the rest of the business.
Fantastic, and it seems to be working. What I get, sort of university from hearing all your answers is just the way Outlook is growing organically. I mean, it's the sign of something that really is thriving when things just naturally flow like this, and you go from, you know, the wonderful ally that helped set up the handbook to then, you know, looking at groups for, you know, parents of LGBTQ plus people. It's just so organic. I love it. It's brilliant. And we were talking when we discussed, you know, before we came up with all of our questions. You have two executive committee members actually spoke to the CEO, and the rest of, you put the EC, which I'm assuming is your leadership board. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, about LGBTQ plus issues. I mean, how important is it to have those conversations right at the top? I mean, to be able to go directly to the CEO, because, you know, invariably, as much as, you know, some organizations are better at others, as, you know, at power sharing, invariably things do trickle down from the top, don't they? And has that helped with cultural change?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as an employee network, we've grown from grassroots level, you know, obviously quite steadily over the last 10 years. But there is only so much we can do as kind of employees at that level. You know, we can spread the word, we can start initiatives, we can do events and things like that. But ultimately, if the company backing isn't there from the very top, we can never really drive that cultural change that we need to. And so having these two executive committee sponsors has been completely invaluable. They are so supportive and are there to you know, champion LGBT rights at the highest levels. You know, and like you said, it will trickle down and is reaching managers and below.
Yeah, and I say it's fundamental to that, because it's the top down, bottom up, but it is a bit where, when you do have barriers, when people realise actually the boss is fully behind it and says that, then people who may wish to try and stop you doing some things will tend to start backing away, and you can actually then start making the progress and move forward. And the fact that our previous CEO, gave us 6 hours of his time a while back just to talk about that, understand things in a proper, full and frank conversation. And then our new CEO, Charles Woodburn, let's say within a few weeks and just taken over as CEO, you're thinking, well, where, you know, maybe a month before that, I actually had a session with us out in the UK, you know, when he was only in post within a matter of a few weeks. And that, again, sends a very powerful message about where the leadership is actually at and how important they view things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would assume you would say then, you know, looking at any other sort of networks for other large businesses, you know, would that be a key piece of advice you would give, you know, try and get buy-in and support at the top?
You have to get buy-in at the top. If you haven't got buy-in at the top, you can go so far, but there's a lot of things that need to change. Aren't actually, as an employee resource group, it's not actually our responsibility, and we don't have the authority to do some of the changes that need to be made. We can advise, but fundamentally, it's a lot of things to change up the business owners. We haven't got the leadership in place for doing it. We can sit there, we can make some inroads, but we'll never make the inroads that take for us. We've never made the inroads that we have done without that leadership.
Yeah, it's certainly taken us, you know, from that support network for LGBT people, you know, to get together and have a conversation, and really taking it from that to let's change the business, let's make it better, let's, you know, make improvements for the lives of LGBT people. And you know, the leadership buy-in has been fundamental to that.
Amazing. You've also been talking about targeting training at HR and especially procurement. This has come up with a lot of people across all different groups that I've been speaking to during these webinars, and how sometimes wording, especially with job applications, can be seen as, you know, perhaps a bit dismissive or can put people off from certain groups. Has that HR sort of conversation been important, Sam?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we've done some training with our kind of graduate recruitment team along that front as well, and making sure that the people at the forefront, you know, the people that are having that engagement with, you know, the very first engagement with potential employees at the front of the business, you know, they need to make sure that people are aware that we're inclusive of LGBT people, and they need to, you know, use the right language and be aware of that.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, you've got this, you know, wonderful resource now, you know, with Outlink UK. But of course, people applying might not know. They might still have slightly, you know, antiquated ideas about the industry as a whole or the company. So yeah, I can totally see why that is super important. And so, Bruce, was there quite a lot of feed in to the training? Did Outlink actually have a lot of?
Well, I mean, the training effectively has been developed by us as Outlink UK. And then go through and then actually deliver it. I mean, we've evolved it over time as, you know, as we go forward and as we learn more. And sometimes we tailor it depending on what the audience actually is, to make sure the right messages are getting through to where their needs are. So obviously we've done the HR, we've been working with procurement to help improve our procurement side, and then how do we look at how that then flows out down the supply chain, because we've got huge supply chain with our business. And then the same more recently, we've also within the air part of the business, from the education, the training we've done with some of our senior leadership, the air manufacturing director then challenged us to say, right, we always have issues of how do we get the message to people on the shop floor, because most of our comms, a lot of our comms are easy if you've got IT, but if you're on the shop floor, how are you getting the messaging? He actually then challenged us to say, right, I want you to, within 18 months, I want you to train all of the air manufacturing function, which is over 3,000 people. Wow. So get everybody in his whole function for an hour, running through the sort of basically the allies course, so everybody gets aware of it, understands we exist, what we can do, help change the culture, and then do any follow-ups from there. So we were well on the way to doing that until a certain pandemic kind of
yes.
there. But again, we are now looking at how do we then evolve in the new world and how do we go forward. But again, the fact that we've actually had a senior director say, take the train and we value what you're actually doing in the train, and then now train the whole of my function, again, is a big step forward.
Well, picking up actually on where we are in the world at the moment, we're in the midst of the COVID pandemic. I believe you offer support for mental health. Is that still operational at the moment? Because I imagine it must be more important than ever. Sam, have you been dealing with anything to do with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as we said a few times, we exist as an employee network to support people. So, in an unofficial capacity, we offer a friendly ear, and which has continued. We've had to make it clear to our members that we are still here. We're accessible, accessible via email and on the phone and stuff. But yeah, also some of us are actually mental health first aid trained, which has been really helpful for us as a group and in supporting our colleagues. But yeah, we're trying to make sure that people know we're still here. We've had a few people come and speak to us about how difficult it is for them during this time and being locked down. I think we've all experienced our own challenges as well.
Yes.
So yeah, it's just having that kind of friendly face and someone that you can chat through it with.
Fantastic. I mean, yeah, certainly. I think everybody's going through their own, even people that perhaps have no history of mental ill health. This current situation puts people under a lot of pressure. I think it's great though that you've got, specifically mental health first aid trained staff, because actually even that is really, quite far ahead of the curve in a lot of places. Bruce, do you know how long that you've actually had first aid mental health trainees?
I'd probably say, because I say it probably became more prevalent probably about 2 years ago or so. For that, I mean, prior to that, we had people who'd done other bits of training, but the mental health first aid stuff's really come into its own across the company, not just with our EIG, but more broadly as a bit. Yeah, cool. Mental health is a big issue that we need to make sure we take care of.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as I said, it's something you're hearing more and more about, but it's great that you can offer that as well, basically. Because as we do know, members of the LGBTQ community can often suffer, more adversity in terms of their mental health. I see that a target that you've got, which I think is fantastic. So you're aiming for the Stonewall top 100 employers by around 2025, which sounds exciting. Do we have any particular plans or roadmap to get us there, Sam?
Yeah, no, it's a tricky one. I think the main thing for us as a business is taking that step away from everything LGBT related being owned by the employee resource group and being owned by Outlink and us being the drivers and moving that then towards the actual areas of the business. And so saying for each of the heads of departments, them to take the ownership and make sure that their bit of the business is functioning and is it as inclusive of LGBT people as possible. Because, as we've already said, there's only so much we can do. And that's been evidenced in our feedback from previous years of submitting a response to the Stonewall Workplace Quality Index. So it's just getting that business has now, stood up and said, given themselves this target and said, we're going to take this seriously and we're going to, and work towards this aim. And not just because it's a publicity thing, it's all about actually putting those steps in place within our organisation and making the change so it's better for our employees. And we recognise that a really good way of structuring ourselves and doing that is by working towards the benchmark that Stonewall set out.
Fantastic. I mean, Bruce, obviously you've been with BAE for quite a while. Would it feel like quite a big achievement for you if, by 2025 you can make the top 100 Stonewall employers?
Oh, that would say if doing that would be sort of the icing on the cake. So we don't need to be there, but it's doing it. It's getting the score for what we're doing, not just being a top 100. But if we get into that, that means we've made so much change, made so many improvements. That would be, yeah. I could quite happily then look at retiring at that point.
Well, I mean, yes, it sounds as if, throughout Link UK, BAE have really taken, some massive steps forward. So, I think that sort of recognition, recognition isn't everything, but it's great because, many other companies can then learn from your journey. And I think that's what's so important, because then, like you said about the resource for children and parents, which, is now more freely available outside of the company, this is how we change the world.
Yeah, and I think the important word you mentioned there was the journey. For us, it's looking at that feedback that we get every year and saying, oh, do you know what can we do to just be slightly better, and those incremental changes just to keep pushing and hopefully get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Journey is always it's a very good word. So yeah, I mean, looking to the future in general, I mean, this is sort of a slightly broad, slightly maybe even off-topic question, but I mean, I'm sure, I don't know, but I imagine both of you have been working from home a lot more. I'm sure most people are at the moment. Do you think that, do you think that's going to be the future? Do you think that after this, one of the things that might come out of this is we change our ways of working? Could that be, I mean, I don't know, I'll put that to both of you, but certainly, does that seem like that might be tied in with the future?
I think, I say, the pandemic, I say, is it's caused not just our business, but all businesses to suddenly, things that you couldn't do before or hadn't been invested in or whatever, the capital wasn't there, to suddenly go, we have to put it in place because we have to now. So a lot of barriers from not doing some things have now gone. We've demonstrated what we can all do from working from home where we are. So I think the world will be a different place post-COVID. What we're going to do is really make sure that we don't forget all the good things that come out of it.
Yeah, it would be great, wouldn't it, if we could keep some good things from it? And yeah, I mean, it's part of a wider question, isn't it? I mean, if we can change through a situation like this, perhaps working from home more, reducing our carbon footprint a little bit, and things like that, then what are the changes possible? Which I think is kind of what's exciting about that. Well, I mean, that has been fascinating. Time has flown as ever. Thank you both, Bruce and Sam, for being here today. I've enjoyed chatting to you immensely. And thank you for watching. And please do remember to share the link for this webinar. Until then, it's goodbye. And we look forward to finally being able to celebrate the awards with you later this year. So thank you to everyone for watching, and to Sam and Bruce. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.